Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast, where we focus on how authors found success, looking at strategies that have taken them to the top of the bestseller charts, as well as what they've learned from their mistakes. Because being an indie author is more than knowing the latest marketing trend. It's about being innovative and creative and learning from your mistakes. Your co-hosts, Jamie Albright and Sarah Rosette, couldn't be more different. In fact, they're a study in contrasts. However, despite all of their differences, they agree that sharing what they wish they'd known, both the good and the bad, is the key to moving forward. Let's get to the show.
Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sarah Rosette.
And I'm Jamie Albright.
And this week we have an interview with Cecilia Mecca. And it was a lot of fun to talk with her. And she shared some really good information, great tips, and lots of good stuff.
She's really, really, really smart and funny. She's hilarious. We have a good time on this interview. So, yeah. So, Sarah, what's been going on with you?
This week, I am just inching along in book 5 of the High Society Lady Detective series. That's kind of how I do it. It just feels so slow, but I keep going.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, so I'm doing a little dictation every day, and then I take that and edit that. It's really messy and raw when I get done with it, but it gives me something to work with. So, so
That's
doing
good.
that and then doing some of the podcast stuff. I feel like we're kind of finding our feet. With the podcast.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. tons of just, I get notes every day, saying they've heard the podcast. It's been really great. And people are receiving it really, really well.
Yeah,
so you were going to tell us something about this interview, though, with Cecilia.
Oh, yeah. So when we were talking with Cecilia, we had a little technical difficulty. And
in the name of Tug, my dog.
Yeah. Tug is a little pushy. He had to get his 2 cents in.
He's got a big head. Yeah. So.
But so he came through and we were talking about print books, and Cecilia said, any tips you've got, she'd be interested. And then we went on and didn't get to talk about it. So I was just going to say, for print, I do hardcovers and I do large print, and the way that I've gotten them out, the easiest way to get the word out is just to tell your readers. Like when you send a newsletter, say, hey, did you know the books are in print? And you can request them from your library. And then, a lot of times the libraries will order them in. And and then if you have a local bookstore, you can kind of get to know them. And sometimes if they're interested, that's a good way to get books in print and get them in the stores. But that's through
harder. Ingram Spark, right?
Yes. Yeah. I use Ingram.
You have to do it through Ingram. Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to enable returns. So it's kind of if you want the bookstores to have them. So anyway, that's just a little quick tip on that. So what have you been doing, Jamie?
Okay, listeners, you sit back because it's a Jamie story. I've really struggled. Just little personal something. My nephew died back in May. And then in January, we had another loss that no one died, but it was a pretty big loss for our family. And I have, I've just really been struggling. And I think what happened was I tried to really push through the grief. And after a certain period of time, you think, oh, I should be okay. And you're not really okay. And so it sort of hit me over the last few weeks, and I'm trying to make some decisions about some things, so that's hard. Maybe we'll do an episode. We'll get Becca Sign back on here, and we'll talk about how to write through the hard times. The problem is my strengths are such that I can't really separate myself from that to write funny when I'm really sad. So that's been really hard. And I think you had even mentioned it, that on the last few times that we got on the podcast to do the introduction, I didn't sound very happy. I was like, womp womp. But it's just a struggle. And I doubt I'm the only person struggling, but it feels like not. It. Yeah, you feel like you're the only one.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard. If we only had to write, that would be one thing, but we don't. We have a whole life, all of us. And some of us can make that separation. And in fact, it's kind of therapeutic for us to make that separation and leave the bad, the sad and bad stuff behind and just write. And some of us,
some of it's just not, it's not, I mean, and if you try to do it when you're not wired that way, it can make it worse, I think. Yeah. And I'm one of those people that like, I like to have everything settled and I like a routine. And if anything is going on in my life, it makes it harder for me to write. And I do know writers that they can use their writing like as a refuge. They can leave all that stuff behind.
They take solace in it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just not me. And so, and I think, you know, just sharing that will help people, you know that, you know, they're not the only one that's going through that. And sometimes it takes a little while to realize, oh, this is not working, and to figure out what to do.
Yeah. What to do next. And so, you know, I mean, it's hard because it's hard admitting you can't be what you want to be, even if that want is unrealistic. Like even under the best of circumstances, I'm not going to be a super fast writer, but it's still hard admitting that. And, so I'm, you know, on top of that, I'm on top of the grief, I'm still having to come to grips with that I can't be all that I want to be. So, so that's me, you know. I'm a real party these days. So yeah, y'all come on over. But
we still have a lot of fun in these interviews. And I think that that's important to share. It's important to share the highs and the lows. I remember somebody was talking about writing. I don't remember who it was, but they said you have to have the high and you have to have the low, because if you never have the low, you don't feel the full, it's not like the full experience. So, you know, and I think that's important to share. So,
right. Yeah,
I think so.
Anyway, we'll move on now to the fun interview with Cecilia, because she is fun. And I told her after last week's podcast, I said, I outed us on our bad eating habits, and she just laughed. So we don't talk about that in this podcast, but if you want to know about it, go back to the last podcast with Nathan. Yeah, it
was mentioned last week. So I think we're all right there on, we could all eat better. Definitely. It's like go off to have Chick-fil-A for lunch today.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, here's the interview with Cecilia. Y'all take care.
Cecilia Mecca is the author of steamy historicals that transport readers to another time and place. She also writes paranormal romance about the ultimate bad boys, sexy, wealthy, and swoon-worthy vampires. She can be found in Northeast Pennsylvania, chai in hand, thinking up new ways to tame both medieval and paranormal bad boys. And she's also the creator of a great Facebook group for authors, Launching Indie. Hi, Cecilia.
Hi, ladies. How are you?
Good. Hi, Cecilia.
Good morning.
So you're in your cozy sweater, and I'm in a tank top because
because it's winter in Texas, and that's what we wear.
Yeah, that's what we wear.
I am so jealous. I wrap myself in this thing every day. It's so cold up here.
Oh, well, it looks very nice and cozy. So, Cecilia, tell us what genres, we just went over it in the bio, but give us a little more information about the genres you write in, and just anything you want to talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I started off in medieval romance. I never know if I call it Scottish romance, historical romance, medieval romance, Scottish, historical, medieval romance. So we could go with any of those, but that's kind of my main genre, so to speak. Last year, I launched a series in paranormal romance with the vampires, and that was a lot of fun. And then this year, I'm going to dip my toes. I'm going to put my big girl pants on and dip my toes into contemporary romance as well. So, yeah, I know. And Jamie doesn't know this yet, but she's going to help me. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it'll be tons of fun. But now, are you doing that under Cecilia Mecca, or
no? So I've learned my lesson. I'm happy to talk about that at some point. You know, I think it's actually a perfect topic for this particular podcast.
Yes.
I've certainly learned, what not to do.
Yeah.
With launching a new genre. So this one will have a pen name.
Secret pen name for writing.
Yeah. So secret in that I have no problem telling people in terms of authors. I think it's going to make sense so for people to know it's me. What I really want is for my existing readers to not find out about it, at least for a while. So that's,
makes
I don't know
sense.
If call it secret for readers. Yes.
Delayed.
Yeah.
Delayed. Yeah. There you go. Exactly.
Well, so tell us, how did you get into writing fiction?
Yeah, so I was an English teacher. I think every English teacher secretly, wants to be So I've always, loved literature, and I taught English for 15 years. And then for my last 5 years in education, I taught teachers. So I went around to school districts in Pennsylvania and did workshops and things like that I was an ELA consultant. So English language arts and writing was one. So I've always really had this desire, and I've been reading my entire life. I was a medieval studies minor, so it all kind of fits together, and I've read romance since Sweet Valley High. And I've always had this goal. I want to write a book, but I just never imagined it as a career until, I put the first book out, and then, it did well. The second book did really well, and here I am full time, and it's amazing. So I retired after 20 years in education and have been writing full time. This is going into my third year.
That's
That is awesome. That is great.
Yeah, congratulations.
It sounds like a nice merging of like your interest and like you had sounds like you already had a lot of the research background for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a weird bird. I guess I absolutely love the research. It's a part of, I could see someday doing historical fiction, and that's a whole different animal, but I love the research. I love medieval studies. I love romance. And I love teaching too. So jumping into nonfiction a little bit with my author group you mentioned. So thanks for that. I could see kind of tapping into the last few years as a consultant too, and just kind of bringing it all together. Maybe would have gotten a few less degrees and, that I'm still paying money on to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up. But at least I found it eventually, right?
That's the important thing.
Yeah. I know. So what was your first big success? Was it the first book?
No, so I'd say the second one. The first book, I actually planned to launch The Thieves' Countess until I kind of learned about strategies, and then put a pause on that release, went back and wrote a prequel novella, The Ward's Bride, and I used that as my lead magnet. And so I released those very quickly together and, made mistakes there. Talking about what I learned. I released The Ward's Bride on Super Bowl Sunday. I have no idea what I was thinking. When I look back, I laugh. I said, what in the world? Honestly, it wasn't supposed to be a big launch. It was like, okay, let's just get this novella out there so I can start giving it away for free. But I wouldn't do that again. So I put those out in pretty quick succession, and it did okay, and it got some visibility. But the second book, The Lord's Captive, in a now finished series, that's the one that it just sold really well. And by the time that one was out, maybe a month or so, 2 months, I started to look at this completely different. Maybe this isn't a hobby. Maybe this could be a career, because I was almost replacing my income.
Wow.
At that point. So yeah, so I would say the second one. And when I look back, I think the cover was really on point. It's still one of my favorite covers. So I think that has a lot to do with it. But I kind of put all of the pieces in place for that one to be successful. But there's been books that have come out since then that weren't as successful as that one. So I do think some of it is, just right time, right place, luck, time of year. I tried to replicate it. I was like, okay, June is the thing. I will now always launch in June. But it's not that easy, as you guys know.
And the universe goes, just kidding.
Yeah. Good luck trying to pinpoint that. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So what do you wish you'd known about writing or craft as you look back now?
I wish I had read craft books, because I kind of came into this a little with a bigger head than I should have. I was an English teacher. I had studied literature my whole life, and I taught writing. So this was, I at least knew how to write, sure. What I didn't know is that writing fiction, and specifically genre fiction, has its very own rules. I really hadn't read a lot about 3-act structure. I knew what it was. So I wrote The Thieves' Countess, and I went back. I had to so heavily edit that I probably should have rewritten it, but I wasn't willing to give it up. But just, some simple books. My two favorites are Kathy Yardley, Rock Your Plot, and for me in romance, Romancing the Beat, a very short but great, plot structure book. Those things those two could have really helped me save a lot of time and trouble with that first book. So I had wished I read some craft books. And when people come to me now, that's the first thing I do is say, go read Kathy Yardley and start from there. And then at least understand plot. And, even if you're not a plotter and don't plan to be a plotter, just knowing that inherent 3-act structure or whatever you use. I kind of have some different ones now that I've tested out. Yeah. Just knowing something about reader expectations in that specific niche, which for me is genre fiction.
Yeah. Yeah. You did a great podcast with Nathan Van Coops about plot books, I thought that was great. I'm a plot geek too, and so I love that. And I was like, "Ooh, new resources." So we'll link to that so people can go find that if they're
Bookface is live.
Yeah,
awesome. Yeah, Nathan is fantastic, and he's a plot geek too. So you're in the Plot Geeks Club with us.
Yay!
It's a fun place to be. I never imagined being here, to be honest. I was a pantster, and so I came to the dark side.
Yeah. You can see over my shoulder here.
Someone's a bit of a plotter.
Yeah, no, I'm really not. But I've had so much trouble starting and then getting stuck that I have forced myself to try to plot. And so I was using Romancing the Beads. So I did that this weekend.
I love it. It's very pretty.
Jamie's showing a poster board with a bunch of beautiful, bright sticky notes on it. Yes. So she's got her book planned out now.
Well, we'll see how that goes.
But you have a plan.
I have a plan. So Cecilia, tell us about marketing. I mean, what do you do and what you wish you'd known about it when you started?
Yeah, so
what do you do now, I guess?
Yeah. I came from a unique place because I was a blogger for many years. So I had a bit of a platform. So in some ways it was a head start, but not so much because that platform, they weren't book readers. And I had never, I had thousands of Twitter followers, but they were following me from my blog, which was kind of parenting hacks and picks and things like that. So what I wish I had known is about marketing that I know now after 3 years is how important the packages. And I've known that from the beginning. I've been hearing that from the very first, course I took in the first broadcast I heard, but now I really get it. And I understand what reverse engineering means a little bit. So for a long time, I thought, okay, I'm coming into this with a platform. So I really did use social media. I didn't paid advertise for a long time. And even now I run a Facebook ad for 2 weeks when I release, that's it. I run Amazon ads and, so I kind of use that social media platform, and I still do to kind of launch. But what I didn't realize then is it's fantastic that I want to write certain things. And I feel like if I write Jeffrey, his brother should have a story. That's fantastic. But is Jeffrey's story compelling enough to sell a book? Does that story necessarily match with, let's say, a trope? Now I'm very conscious of exactly what that package is going to look like. How am I going to market this book over all of my other books? And I think of that now before I even start writing. So I kind of have to marry what I feel, where the muse takes me, and also how will this book sell? And what will the cover look like? And those are things I never thought of until well after the book was written, So I kind of went with my muse. I felt like this was the next good book, and then, went that direction. Now I'm a lot more deliberate about that.
Right. So when you say package, like what's in that package?
Yeah. Sorry. So the package is, the cover, the blurb, the title. Yeah. I'm used to titling books, sometimes after I send it to the editor because I'm so bad at it. Now I recognize that title is really, really important and going to pull people in. So I've completely reversed how I approach a book. So for instance, in the pen name that I mentioned, jumping into contemporary, I don't have the story, but I do have the photo that I'm using, the title, the tropes I'm hitting, and all of that stuff. So that's very different than the way I did it when I first started.
Right. Yeah. I think tropes are important too. I mean, knowing that trope, or at least having one. I tend to throw about 16 in, but having the one is important because that is part of the marketing too. Yeah. Interesting. I don't start a book unless I have a title. I always have my titles first. Yeah. The Running from a Rock Star was actually Rock My World until I realized that there were about 12 Rock My Worlds and about 5 of them were erotica. And I'm like, I can't go with that one. And then I had to do something else. But after that, I had a title for all my books. I even have titles for books that I'm going to write like next year.
I'm not surprised because you're smart and that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, I just think that's how we all think so differently. I mean, we all so I think that's encouraging though, because you don't have titles and you've been super successful. So I think that's really, really awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. There's a few ways to skin this cat for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, so on the marketing, we wanted to ask you too about Facebook Live and Facebook groups, because you seem to use those and use them really well. So do you have any thoughts, ideas, tips on that? Things you would recommend people do or don't do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a huge fan of free marketing strategies. I like organic a lot because it is free. So
Free is
and
good.
I'm a fan of that because, you know, I feel like I'm giving my money and I'm happy to pay for ads when they convert and they work well, but it's just so frustrating when they don't. So I'm constantly on the look for what's the next social media thing that I could also tap into while I'm simultaneously learning how to do ads and such. For a while it was Facebook page, and then, you know, the organic reach on pages went away. And that's why I migrated over to Facebook Live, because Facebook was prioritizing that. I still think Facebook Live is fantastic. Now I'm attaching the lives to comments, to bots, and doing things a little bit different. Groups still have good reach, and that's why I really do focus on that. And I think a lot of, I've seen some amazing authors do things in groups, and I'll be honest, I go in and I get ideas from them, listen to, I can't remember it, but I can certainly give it to you afterwards, one podcast that I think was really kind of life-changing in terms of how to be deliberate about groups. Again, being very strategic about, you know, the certain kinds of posts that you're putting up so that you get engagement, having once a week in a group something that is relatable, that really is just fun, and you're not selling your book, just to reminding yourself, you know, you're not supposed to be selling all the time. And I know that, and I know 80-20, and I get that, but sometimes, especially when a book is coming out, you get so excited, like, you know, check this out. So you have to remind yourself, okay, once a week, absolutely nothing about a book, and it's just a relatable post. Another day of the week, we're doing a survey. Again, nothing about the post, and not a survey in terms of I put up an actual survey, because those they're dead in the water. Because there's no engagement, people are clicking on a link to take a survey. So instead, something quick that you could, you know, crowdsource, or just a fun survey. I do a lot of emojis, you know, so choose an emoji, or let's do a GIF celebration or something like that. But surveying is fantastic as long as you're not using the built-in survey. You know, just kind of encouraging comments. And then, you know, maybe the day after one of those posts that do really well, then you kind of put something out. So knowing I've just engaged a bunch of, you know, readers, Facebook likes those posts. So, you know, they're probably going to give me some slack today. And then after that, it's, you know, start the clock again. Yeah. So being strategic about it, but also having a lot of fun, and just knowing that in my reader group, they're there, yes, to connect with me, and yes, to hear about the books. But we also just want to have fun and have a good time. So, you know, right now we're on, you know, a Henry Cavill kick, and we'll just, you know, ride that wave for a long time. Yeah, for hopefully a long, long time. You know? I actually think I might dedicate a day a week, and I think that could be my new thing. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I was on Instagram, and I follow Colleen Hoover because she's a genius, but she was talking about when she wrote one of her books, and I can't remember the name of it now, but a lot of her readers started messaging her and saying the lead character for this book is on American Idol. Like, this guy on American Idol looks just like this. And so she reached, and then they started her fans started messaging him. So she messaged him and just say, hey, this is what's happening. So they sort of collaborated on some songs for this book. But she said, I wanted to give my readers something special. So she got him to be on the cover of that book.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Wow.
No, and like, I got chills just saying that, because it's like just being so tuned into your readers and wanting to give them that. Yeah. I just thought that was so, so, so smart. And I think that's the next level stuff, you know, where you really go from just being entertaining your readers to being in this relationship with your readers. And I thought that was just so brilliant. So.
Yeah. And knowing them. I mean, you mentioned probably the most important thing, and that is knowing who your readers are and knowing what they want. Everyone says that, but really getting to know them has been, and that's what the Facebook group and the live, because I feel like those two are similar. They're really kind of letting me dive in to, you know, what my readers are thinking. That is so important. I always thought, well, I know my readers. I'm one of them, right? I read historical romance for years and years. And to some degree that's true, but I'm not specifically my readers today, what they're looking for, what they want. Why are they in my group? And I've asked that question before, and I'll ask it at least once a month. why are you here? Because those answers are what I want to give them more of.
Right.
I was at I was in social media long before books. And I remember being at a conference once, and this is going to seem really simple, but I thought it was brilliant. There was a keynote speaker, and she was just an expert at social media marketing. And she said, now listen, I know I'm here to talk about Pinterest, and that's kind of the focus of this keynote speech. But I will tell you, for every social media channel, your goal is to figure out what's working and do more of that.
Yeah.
Period. And I'm like, that is so simple. It's obviously nothing I'm not already doing. But when you look at it, how often are you deliberate, or am I deliberate about figuring out what works and giving them more? And now I schedule a day a month to do exactly that. So what is working here? What are my top Instagram posts? What are my top Facebook group posts? They're liking Henry Cavill. Guess who's going to show up once a week in my group? So it's simple, but I think that definitely is a useful piece of advice.
Yeah, hey, that's so smart.
Maybe you can get Henry Cavill to be on your next book cover.
Oh, now
fingers crossed on that
one. Yeah, that seems like
hashtag goals.
That seems feasible. Thanks, Kim.
I'm throwing it out there.
That's awesome.
What assumptions did you make at the beginning of your writing career? Looking back, did they turn out to be right or wrong?
Aside from I know how to write a fiction novel pretty well, which turned out with some tweaking, it was right. So I think one of the assumptions, the assumption I made off the top was that this was a hobby, and this was just something that would be fun, and never expected it as a career. So that one was a big fat wrong. I'm happy to report. So I think that was one of the biggies.
Yeah, that turned out well though.
It did turn out well. And I'm trying to think of, it did, some of the other assumptions. And I think one of them was, and I think we're going to get into this maybe later, but one of them was, well, if I can do it in this genre, I can do it in another. And that one didn't necessarily turn out to be exactly the way I'd hoped. So it's not all roses all the time. It's a super fun career, and I love it more than I've loved anything I've ever done, but it's not without its challenges for sure.
Yeah, that is true. Well, so what do you look back on that you've done and think, that was probably not worth my time? We all have lots of things like that, but is there anything that comes to mind?
Because I was a blogger, I really did come into this kind of with a blogging mindset, and that was to cultivate every channel. They say, I don't know, whoever they are, they say sometimes pick one or two social media channels. I always go back to social media a lot because it's something I know. And they say pick one or two social media channels and really focus on those. But as a blogger, that's not what you do. You're an influencer. You're expected to be everywhere. So I had everything but a YouTube channel. I mean, I had one, but I didn't cultivate it. So every year I set off with, okay, this year is going to be my YouTube year, and I am going to learn. And I did. I really jumped into YouTube and had some ideas on my channel, and I started mapping things out because I wasn't there. And same thing with Pinterest. I'm there. I pin inspiration things, but I know I can have a better Pinterest strategy, hashtagging and organizing my boards and linking back to old books. And so there's a lot I can do there, but I had to give myself permission to not and to let those things go, because I guess one of the assumptions is that I can be a kind of a blogger, but also an author, but they really are two different things. And so as a blogger, my goal is to write blog posts and to pull people into all these, from these channels to my blog posts. As an author, oh, by the way, I also have to write books, and that takes time. Yeah. So when I'm doing that, I can't be doing all these other things. So I've kind of scaled those back. So yeah, my YouTube channel is pretty non-existent. My Pinterest page just isn't optimized. It just kind of sits there. But I've had to let those things go.
Yeah. I remember hearing Chris Syme talk about outpost social media channels where like you have a presence like on Pinterest and you have stuff there, but then you're directing people to your main, like wherever you spend all your time. And to me, I was like, oh, that is awesome, because then like you're there, but you don't have to be everywhere all the time. That was like a huge relief to me, because I don't know that it's possible to do all the things and write all the books. It's just, we're going to kill ourselves if we keep it up. Yeah.
And if it's maybe possible, but not necessarily even worthwhile, because if I did that, then something else isn't happening, the writing the next book or, and I've learned that some channels are better for authors than others. So I'm a Twitter girl. I love Twitter. I start my morning every day with Twitter. Call me a dinosaur. I love, usually I love Twitter. Sometimes I have to, but I do. But I had to let that go too, because it's not the best channel to bring in your readers. It's great to connect with other authors, but it's, not necessarily the best channel. So I love that, and so I guess right now Twitter, Pinterest are definitely outpost channels for me. YouTube, yeah, nobody's finding my YouTube channel. I actually hope they don't. It's pretty abysmal, but yeah, I do like that advice. I agree with it.
Yeah. So what's the biggest gamble you've taken in your writing career?
Let's go back to that mistake. Well, I don't know if it was a mistake, but we'll go back to the pen name, the paranormal pen name. That was a gamble because I was writing along doing well in historical, and there was really no good reason to do that except, again, I was following the muse, right? So I had, after an epic binge of True Blood and Vampire Diaries, I was feeling very vampire, and let's do this. I got it. Even when my husband, who is kind of a partner in this with me, said, that seems like it's going to take a lot of time and we're going to take away from the historical. But if that's where you really want to be, I'm like, oh yeah, I want to be here. Like I am basically a vampire. So, that was risky. And, it basically took, 5 months or so. I was smart about it. I did stockpile historical books. So I didn't have,
that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. I wasn't completely, I am slightly risk averse. So I went a little bit ahead. I stockpiled some books so that my historical readers never went longer. I think it was 4 months, which is long for me. And definitely it took a hit, but it was 4 months before they got a new release. But in the meantime, I took 5 or 6 months to write 3 rapid release paranormal books. And it didn't go the way I'd hoped. But I can't say I regret it for lots of reasons. One, those books are there. They're well reviewed. And someday I will go back to them and do something with them. But I will do it when Vampire is actually trending upwards as a market. Yeah. Because I hadn't looked at that. Afterwards, kind of learning lessons, I wish I knew to really take a look at the paranormal market. I had seen other vampire books doing fine. But it turned out a lot of them were vampire urban fantasy, vampire paranormal, the vampire romance. Typically, right now in early 2020 or 2019, they're coupled with some of the other genres that were doing better. So shifters, I wish I had put a shifter in there. And yes, I love vampires, but he could be friends with the shifter and that would have really helped, but he wasn't.
Yeah. Well, vampires are one of those things that they cycle,
Yes.
And so you will be perfectly positioned whenever they come back around, and then you can do like a little relaunch or whatever and ride that new wave. So,
then that's the plan.
Vampires are around forever.
Yeah.
They never die.
What I mean. Yeah, I know.
You're so clever.
I know. Too bad nobody will pay me to be clever.
Actually, they kind of do.
Well, they kind of do. Yeah, I guess they're right. I used to say, too bad nobody pays me to be funny. And I'm like, oh, wait. They do.
Hey, look. So that's, I think, the biggie for me.
Yeah.
Have you ever made a mistake that turned out to be a good thing, Cecilia?
So I made a mistake that turned out to be a good thing. Can I actually answer the same way and say yes to paranormal?
Yes, of course.
Because, in a way it was a mistake. I mean, I didn't hit my 2019 goals because I basically took the first 4 months of the year and didn't make the income that I would have with historical. So, in that way, it was a mistake if you look at it in terms of the short term, yearly goals and that kind of thing. But I learned so much. Part of what I learned now about that reverse engineering and having the marketing there and, following your muse to a point, all of that I learned because of the paranormal.
Right.
Now, and I'm not saying that my next pen name will, just go wild and crazy because of it. I'm jumping into a hugely competitive genre, but I definitely will apply those lessons that I've learned, in terms of one of the biggies is having a pen name. So I chose not to have the pen name for the paranormal because I talked to everybody and it just seemed like that was the way I should go. But that was a mistake for me, at least. So many of my historical readers came over. I thought I was being very clever to have some of my, historical clan chiefs and English knights 700 years later be the vampires in my vampire stories, where these historical readers came over that don't typically read that. My also bots from day one and since then have always been historical. They actually are beautiful also bots for a historical moment. Like all of my favorite authors and, no scammers. They're like pure as can be, but there's zero romance. And that's after running Facebook ads, running Amazon ads to them, I did change to a pen name, like after 2 books, 2 of the 3, but it was a little too late. So learning that lesson this time, that's why my historical readers aren't going anywhere near this genre for a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's one reason we want to talk to people about this, because it's like, even though it doesn't work out like we thought we wanted it to, we still learn things and we can still apply that in the future. So I think that's awesome. So, so is there anything that you've stopped doing, tasks or goals or things that you've just taken off your list that you think, don't need to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned some, so I took off Pinterest. I took off, just in a practical sense, I took off trying to create and start a YouTube channel. I definitely took off being so hard on myself. And I know that's kind of a mindset thing, and it's not I try to be practical.
It's important though.
But it is important. I think last January when I put out the first, paranormal, and it didn't do what I expected, I had a tough few weeks in that, having had success with the historical, I was used to, I put out a book and this is what happens. And this one's going to do at least as good or maybe better because it's a bigger audience. And I really had to talk myself off of that, those high expectations for myself, and just readjust what the expectations are. And that lesson also will carry through with this one. I'm going to expect with my first book in the new genre to just build a platform, right? I'm not going to have the same expectations I did. And again, it's not a practical tip, but I think mindset is important too, because you can easily be defeated in this particular industry because there are ups and downs. And I've learned that coming strong out of the gates, success with second book, and you leaving your job after, the first 6 months of publishing comes with a high bar, I guess you could say.
It does.
Yeah. And so in some ways, if I started, and just built myself up, I wouldn't have had those high expectations. So I've tempered them a bit and have decided to go a little bit easier on myself. And that's hard for me to do.
Yeah. I think when you do that, like leaving the job after 6 months or all the things you were talking, you put a lot of pressure on the next book.
Sure.
And that's not always very fair to the book or to us, and that's definitely.
Yeah. Realizing that, and we've talked about this, Jamie, realizing that no 2 books are really the same. You could do everything right and still not quite hit. And I know that the last book I have a strong series now. I'm very happy with how it's going. I just launched book 4. It's doing well. Book 3 launched on a glitch, and I had absolutely no control over that. It just happened. It was a glitch where Amazon, nothing happened for 24 hours. It was one of those things. And so if you do have that pressure, you can really have a few bad days or weeks in this industry. But now I'm at the point where it's like, okay, so it's a glitch, and this launch isn't going to be where I want it to be, but the next one hopefully will be. And then people will come back and read book 3. And that's what they're doing now. No big deal. So yeah.
Yeah. It's just not panicking over that.
Yes.
Initial thing, which is hard.
It's very hard.
So hard to do.
The cover reveal, and you're excited about a book. I mean, you just want everyone to do better than the last. And so it is, I think, one of the hardest things, really.
Yeah, I do too. I agree with you. What changes have you seen in your genre over the course of your author career, and how have you adapted?
So yeah, I always knew historical readers trended older. I think it's one of the reasons Facebook ads can be a little bit tough in my genre. And I knew always there was a ceiling on historical romance. It's not one of the biggest, especially medieval Scottish. If I was willing to write Regency, then maybe that would be a different story. But I'm not. I love reading Regency, but I am not a big fan of that many rules when I'm writing. So I would say, it hasn't gotten necessary. We haven't picked up younger readers. And we talk about this a lot in the historical romance community. How do a lot of our readers are ones we won't reach. They still are reading trad. They're in bookstores. They're, things like that. And that hasn't let up, I guess you could say. So in some ways it's becoming harder. And that's why I really do want to diversify. Also those scammers. And I know everybody has them in every genre, but I did launch a book. I looked, just this morning, shockingly. And
10 minutes ago.
I'm
None of us do that.
As we're talking here. So in my defense, it's within the last week. After a week, I do let it go a bit. But in the top 10 of my genre, at least half, if not more, are scammers or 99-cent books. And the visibility is definitely harder than it was last year. And it's harder last year than it was the year before. So, I started in 2017 and didn't even give a wink. When people started talking scammers, I was like, listen, head down. You can't control that. You can control what you can control and don't worry about them. That's great advice. And I do try to take it. But also when you look at your genre and your list and know that your visibility is hurting because of it, again, can't do anything about it. These black hat strategies will exist and will continue to, especially with some in KU, but it's definitely not gotten any.
It's another one of those like mindset things that like you have to know it's out there and do what you can to deal with it. But a lot of it's just out of our control. So
it is. And maybe some strategies have to change. I mean, but for the most part, you're absolutely right. Like there's not much we can do about the scammers. I think they'll always exist in some capacity.
Yeah.
So when you said a lot of the readers are in trad, so you're talking about younger readers are reading trad published books in your genre, or
no, I think a lot of historical readers are
still older,
and I think they're reading in trad and reading in paperback. And so I've actually talked to some authors about, and I have some historical romance friends, their strategy is to be hybrid.
I was going to say that might be
and
better.
do that kind of thing. And so that's because I do want to be in historical forever. It's where my heart is. I absolutely love it. So if I ever did look at that particular journey, of trad pub, it would be for that reason, to reach a different readership, specifically in Scottish historical romance, where I know they're our readers. But the practicality of that, I don't see it happening anytime soon. The idea of writing a book and not putting it out, it gives me chills.
Well, because when you write a book for a trad publisher, that's one less. I mean, especially for me, because it takes so long. I mean, that's one less book that you're writing for yourself. And that's a hard. If you write really fast, and you do tend to write faster, it might not be a big deal, but it's still hard, isn't it? To say,
it is, and I feel like I might just keep myself at one big risk per year, right? So
it's a good plan.
Crazy, like let's try this out and see what happens. So maybe that could be 2021. Who knows?
Yeah. So mystery is sort of the same as the readers skew older, and I've had a lot of success with print recently. And so one of my new strategies is like getting all the books in paperback, and I'm doing large print and trying to get them in libraries and stuff. So that's been, a new thing that I'm trying to do. So that might be.
You're doing well at that, though.
Yeah, it's going really well. Yeah, it's definitely harder to track, though, because if you go look at your Amazon rankings, it doesn't show anything, it has no impact on that. So they are getting out there and libraries are buying them. So that might be another, possibility for people who have genres that are a little bit older, maybe not so into the ebooks. So.
Yeah, I would absolutely love to hear some of your strategies. I have the books on Ingram. I actually tested out hardcovers with this particular series. So they are all listed now in paperback and in hardcover in Ingram. So that should be on my to-do list.
The large print might really work for you, Cecilia.
I've thought of that too. Yeah. And so thanks, ladies. I know a larger to-do list today. But I didn't get that.
Sorry. Okay. So what's the best thing you've done to set yourself up for success in your author career?
The best thing I've done to set myself up for success has been to, I think, really cultivate what the reader avatar, so to say, and knowing what my readers want. And I did that even before I put out the very first book. I started with my social media because I had social media platforms, and I started to ask questions. Okay, all these people on Twitter, does anybody read romance books? What do you like? What do you read? Where do you read? How do you read? And I did that on Instagram. I did it on Facebook. I did it on Twitter because I had, again, a lot of my blogger followers tended to be, because I was kind of, I hate this term now, but mom blogger. So there were a lot of moms and there were people that read. And so I have known, because I kind of came from marketing, that it was really important for me to understand the reader. I obviously lost sight of that a bit when I decided that vampires were my life, but now,
just a little detour.
Your eternal life. Yeah.
My eternal life.
I can't stop with the puns. I'm sorry.
I love it. No, so I think doing that, and so kind of jumping into the pen name, I'm doing exactly that same thing, and really trying to get a pulse on. I've read romance for my entire life, and I've read a lot of my friends' contemporary romances just because they're my friends. But now, really getting my pulse on what makes the contemporary romance reader tick. What do those beats look like as opposed to the historical? What is, I've never written first person, so navigating what changes that will bring and such, and practicing that, so I'm kind of taking those same lessons from the first platform build and using them again. But I'm going to do some things different this time. I'm really hesitant, and I'll be honest, where I'm at today is not real sure, but I did a lot of platform build things the first time before I had a book out, gave away books of similar genre and things like that. And I'm really kind of questioning whether I'll do that or not. And I'm still on the fence about it. Trying to keep in my historical, my lists a little bit more pure. And I'm not saying I won't ever do list builders or things like that, but definitely have scaled back on those. I just got rid of 6,000 subscribers that I was paying for that, I could have kept some. And and I know that there's different theories on that, whether you should keep them or get rid of them. But I got rid of them, and not wanting to pay for people that hadn't opened in 6 months, a year. Even though I know the opens are hard to track. And again, there's lots of theories on that. But I do think I want to cultivate an audience this time that is excited about the exact thing I plan to offer them. So, but being very deliberate on that. Again, going back to having learned that, I have to look at this through a marketing lens. Everyone says this is a business, right? If you're publishing, indie publishing, it is a business. But I'm not sure I understood what that meant until now. And I think it was actually at NAINC when someone mentioned the idea of reverse engineering. I was like, oh, that's so clinical.
I don't want to do that.
Why would I do that? And now here I am. Yeah.
It's true. And when you hear people say, write the book you want to, write the book you want to write, that'll make you so happy. It's true. I mean, you can do that.
You have to. Yeah.
You have to also know that if you don't look at the stuff you're talking about, that book may not find a place. And that, to me, that's sad, because you've spent all this time and it is the book you wanted to write. So wouldn't you want it to have a home as well? So I think you can do both. You just have to be deliberate about it, I think.
You can. And I would never jump into a genre, and I know some people will, and I'm not judging at all. I mean, I absolutely think it is a business, and you have to treat it that way. I personally would have to enjoy reading it. And for me, I couldn't write just anything, I mentioned Regency. I absolutely love Regency. The market is there in Regency. It's much better than medieval or Scottish or combined, but I won't be writing it because I know that even if it would be a good business decision, it's just not a good fit for me. So, I'm still looking at that as well. And I personally can't write anything that I wouldn't be excited to sit down and write.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, but that's really smart because you're taking into account what you enjoy and what you want to do, as well as the market. And it's like you're taking like a big picture, and sometimes it just, like, for me, it took me a long time to get to that point where I was like, oh, if I write this series that I really like the idea of, I will also have people I can advertise to, like I'll have those comp authors and, just things like that I didn't even think about in the beginning. So things.
Absolutely.
So besides the vampire book, do you have another wish I'd known then moment in your writing career? Something that you just wish you'd known at the beginning?
I wish I had known, and I guess inherently I did, how important friends would be and how important networking would be. But I think I undervalued the importance of those relationships. I went to conferences in the beginning because I love being around people. I miss colleagues. It's just who I am.
Yeah.
And I went to parties and I had great time and it was lots of fun. And now I realize, for example, just looking back 2 years, well, I probably, if I really was jumping into paranormal, I should have spent maybe 1 or 2 less minutes with my buddies and had gone out and sought people who wrote paranormal romance. But I didn't do that because, again, I'm a social person, and I was like, well, I'm with my friends and this is really great. Again, putting that business hat on too, and realizing that. But I do think that those relationships, you know, my relationship with the historical author community can't be just, it's everything. And you guys probably, I'm sure, have the same in your own genres. Having the genuine support of people who believe in what you do and your work is super, super important. And that's actually one of the daunting things about jumping into a new genre. I found some great paranormal people as well. And doing that again seems a little bit overwhelming, but now I understand how important that is to this career. I would say it's one of the most important things, that networking. And for me, which is why I find value in conferences. Some people say, well, it's away from writing time and it does cost a lot of money, but you will never find me at less than 2 a year. It's just part of my strategy.
Yeah, me too. Well, last year I was conference queen, but
me too.
This year,
you and I were like vying for the crown.
We were on the float as the parade went by.
We were.
But this year I'm only going to 2. I think. But right now I'm only going to 2. But I would say that if you're in a genre and you don't have author friends in your genre, that needs to be at the top of your priority list. Yeah, because it's so important. And if you're in a genre with people who are not supporting you as a peer and a colleague, you need to find new friends, because they're out there, and it's just super important to have those people. If for no other reason, just to call somebody up and say, today is not a good day for me, and have them talk you off the ledge. And so I think that's really good.
And I'm an introvert, and I agree about going to conferences and meeting people. It's hard for me to get out of my shell, but then once I'm out there, I really enjoy it. You know, so it's important.
Good.
I think it's and as Jamie mentioned too, even the mental health part of it. You know, I was excited to talk to you guys. Like, I'm going to see people, so
which is awesome. Yeah,
that's very good. So, where can people find you, Cecilia?
So they can find me pretty much Cecilia Mecca everywhere. I'm most active on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, believe it or not, as I mentioned. So I do love to connect with other authors there. So, but pretty much at Cecilia Mecca. And authors, as you mentioned, again, thanks for that, launching Indie. That was just kind of a passion project.
Yes.
I do like being a part of groups and being able to connect with authors on Facebook, because I'm not necessarily doing it in real life. I don't have an authors group here in chilly Northeast PA. So, but I wanted a place that was really focused on just the positive stuff, because you can get really bogged down in Amazon's broke and I hate this. And you know, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So I just wanted a place where this is all about things that can go right. There's a lot of that too.
Right. So that's Launching Indie on Facebook, and that's a private Facebook group that you have to join. I'm asked to be a part of. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And we're so glad you were here with us today.
Like I said, I was looking forward to this. So thank you for the amazing writing break and letting me actually speak with human beings today.
I know.
So
it was good to talk to you.
Get those words out. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, ladies. And good luck on the podcast.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. We hope this episode inspired you, empowered you, and made you laugh a little bit too. If you loved it, tell your friends about it. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a review. We look forward to being with you again next week.